Good morning. It is 7:14 a.m. on Friday, September 10th, 2021. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. I went to bed early last night, but yeah, my body is still feeling like this is an insufficient amount of sleep. I should go back to bed. I'm not going to go back to bed because I have stuff to do, but yeah, need some caffeine at least. So last night I completed my rewatch of the Matrix trilogy by watching The Matrix Revolutions. And after watching the second one, Reloaded, and actually finding it pretty entertaining, I had seen a couple of people talk about like, oh, people talk about the Matrix sequels, but it's actually, two's not so bad, it's three that's bad. And I was starting to feel like a little worried, like, is that actually how it was? I don't know. After rewatching it, I will say that I think the problems in two are exacerbated in three, but that overall I still kind of like it. It's certainly not without its issues. That's pretty undeniable. I think reflecting on Reloaded and then on Revolutions, I think one of the biggest issues that the sequels have in general is that there are still lots of head explodey sort of ideas floating around, cool philosophical concepts that deal with the science fiction premise. But compared to the ones in the first one, they're harder to dramatize, and the characters mostly don't actually engage with them very much. That's tricky because in the first one, the idea of, oh my gosh, we're living in a simulation, cool, right? But you can actually show that, right? You can show the ways that the simulation can be impacted. You can show the way that they wake someone up. And when they wake someone up, you can show and actually depict this is where all the people are, and this is what they look like in the little pods, and this is all the little hoses that connect into them, and this is the goo that they float in. And you can actually show all that stuff actually happening on screen. And the characters only have to react to the things actually happening to them to be engaging with the plot and the premise. Whereas all of the big reveals that we get in 2 and 3, like the ones that deal with the sci-fi premise as opposed to just, fighting robo-squids, mostly are, there's the architect, right, who reveals that Neo is not even the first Neo, that there's actually been sort of a loop because it's, the whole idea of the Matrix and Zion, and it's like, they can't control things within the Matrix 100%. Every so often there's this variable that emerges and magnifies, and so the whole concept of the one and presenting this choice where they're going to reset everything essentially has happened several times over already. Like, that's a cool idea, but it's harder to like dramatize that, right? It's harder to show that. Like we show on these TV screens, uh, the implied thing being that we see other versions of Neo and how they reacted, but um, that's all depicted in kind of a confusing way. We also meet these other characters that we're told are other programs that behave erratically, but what we really see is just like, here's a person who can maybe do something weird or is in charge somewhere for reasons that are unclear. And then mostly the characters, like Neo in particular, don't really deal with any of that stuff on that level. Like even the architect revealing essentially your whole reality and everything you thought was true. Like not only were you in a simulation before, But technically now, even though you're not in the simulation any longer, you are nonetheless part of a designed, constructed, controlled experiment designed to perpetuate the system, even though you thought you were trying to bust out of the system. But does Neo actually deal with any of that? Not really. Mostly, he gets to make a choice that um, is an interesting choice, which is to this is actually at the end of two, but his choice is accept this level of control, understand that most of humanity will still die, but that you get to save some of them and everything can rebuild and restart the cycle like we have done 6 times already. Or you refuse that offer knowing that at least what we say will happen is that all of humanity will die. But the key that we're told that's different this time is Trinity. Because in order to save Trinity, for her to be one of the people who gets to live, Neo has to reject the architect's offer and hope that he can call the architect's bluff and save the day anyway. And it is Neo's love for Trinity that makes him choose that that option when apparently all of his previous versions went the other way. And so that's what kind of sets everything up. I think that's interesting. Um, but from Neo's perspective as a character, and like this is not a knock on Keanu Reeves. I think Keanu Reeves is a fine actor. I like him a lot, but Neo the character doesn't interact with the architect on the level of this is some sort of a godlike computer program who has legitimately just told me that I'm not even the first me and that all of my rejection is actually part of his plan. And we're talking about the annihilation of the human race in less than 24 hours and all of that sort of thing. And mostly his decision feels more on the level of screw you, I'm going to go save my girlfriend. And then similarly, all of the other times that these ideas come into play in 3, he is only engaging with the issues to the extent that we can see what's happening on screen. Which, again, like, I mean, I get why that would be, but a lot of the big ideas are only spoken and not especially shown on screen. And so I think that drives a lot of the big issues where they are in both of the Matrix sequels, is that in the first one, all of the sci-fi ideas can be shown on screen. In 2 and 3, a lot of them really can't be. They're kind of more abstract, and it's harder to dramatize that. The other problem I think that shows up in 3 is that they wanted to have a huge big battle sequence for the defense of Zion. And in my little tweet thread, I referenced the Battle of Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings 2 Towers several times because it really does feel like that's what they're going for. But the big problem at a script level is that none of our main characters are there. It's a little bit like imagining the Battle of Helm's Deep from the 2 Towers, only neither Aragorn nor Gimli nor Legolas are there. And like in the 2 Towers, there are other characters that we have been introduced to and care about to some extent. Eowyn, say, or Theoden, that little kid. But, like mostly though, we're there for our main characters who we've been with all along. And in Matrix Revolutions, we've been introduced to several secondary characters that showed up in part 2. And the movie really tries hard to use them to engage us with this battle. And there's some very cool stuff in the battle, but it's just harder when none of our main characters are there. Because you've got Neo and Trinity going off to the Machine City. You've got Morpheus and then Niobe and Link are major-ish characters that were introduced in part two, but they are all trying to get back to the city, and then they show up there by the end just in time for the fighting to really mostly be over. Um, and so the battle is harder to care about, even though a lot of the stuff being shown is actually pretty cool. So, like, the movie has some issues, but on the whole, I think I actually still found it pretty entertaining. Pretty entertaining. I don't know why I'm hitting the T's like that. I liked it. I can definitely, like, I'm not telling anybody that they're wrong for not liking it. I recall being disappointed at the time. Um, but I think, again, like, first of all, I will say, I think in general, the idea of one movie turns out really good, so let's hurry up and do two more so it can be a trilogy is a bad storytelling impulse. But that said, I think, first of all, the joke that the sequels are so bad we're gonna pretend that they don't actually exist. I think that's silly. That said, I mean, I don't want to tell anyone else how to enjoy their content, but I think that the movies actually have a lot of good stuff to offer. I enjoyed them. There's some good fights in there. So there's some interesting ideas, even if they are expressed and dramatized less effectively than in the first movie. The first movie is an enduring classic. It's a masterpiece. I think it's fantastic. I think it deserves the hype. The sequels are flawed, but still pretty good. That's what I think, having now rewatched them. So, the big thing now is the new trailer, right? So, the trailer for Matrix 4, Matrix Resurrections came out. And, yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I'm excited about the movie, but like the trailer kind of mostly is just asking a lot of questions that we don't get answers for yet. And, I mean, I suspect that it seems like a lot of it might be retreading um, the first movie a little bit. I mean, there's some things about it that are inherently mysterious just on account of featuring characters who died in the first one, or we thought they did at least. But yeah, so I think we will see. I'm excited about the movie, but I sort of feel like all of the questions that I have about the movie can't really be answered, or at least won't be in a trailer. So we will find out, I suppose, when the movie comes out, which I guess is Christmas. But um, I'm glad that in anticipation of that movie, I rewatched the sequels for the first time since the theater because my lingering memory of them had been that they were disappointing and frustrating. And I would say that while they still have their issues, I enjoy them a lot more, and it has made me think more fondly of the trilogy as a whole as a result. So I'll leave it there, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.